No matter how good you are at a game, there's always going to be sections that are trickier than others, so I thought it'd be fun to go and take a look at what I think are some of the more challenging levels in video games that I've played throughout the years. And to somewhat condense this video, I've also limited this to first-person shooters just because that's my kind of thing. I do want to say too that this is not about saying that any of these sections, and especially the games in particular, are meant to be bad. It's just highlighting some of these more memorably difficult moments, the ones that have me pulling the most hair out or breaking the most controllers. Savvy? And I in no way think that this is any kind of definitive list. It's just some of the hardest levels that I could think of when I put the old noodle to work. Alright, now we got that sorted, let's get into it. Right, so it'd be impossible to make a video on hard levels in FPS games without including this one. Sniper's Last Stand, or Sniper Town as it's also known, is a level that pops up in Medal of Honor Allied Assault's 5th mission. Your only goal here is to make it through the town and locate a missing bazooka team, but a whole bunch of hidden snipers is going to make that task a living hell, as you'll soon discover. Getting through this level in one piece mostly just relies on knowing exactly where the enemies are ahead of time, because they really are put in the most out of way and hidden positions. Which makes sense considering they're snipers, but it ain't that much fun when you're going through it for the first time, and you almost have to kinda let yourself get shot so they give themselves away. This was also before leaning was commonplace in shooters as well, so yeah, expect to take a fair bit of damage. Let me just say, thank God for quick saves.
Heads up!
In its defense though, it does have amazing ambience. So the level takes place in a ruined village during a thunderstorm. When you head into one of the buildings to catch your breath, the sound design even changes so you can hear the raindrops pattering on the tin roofs. And combined with Michael Giacchino's soundtrack, it just makes for one atmospheric backdrop. What's also kind of funny about this level is that it's actually really short. I mean, if you know what you're doing, you can probably get through it in a matter of minutes. But for first time players, and even coming back to replay it for this video, this level is such a huge difficulty spike.
Heads up!
Alright, now for something a bit more recent, we've got the Holt, the third and final level in Doom Eternal's recent DLC, The Ancient Gods Part 1. I mean, look, to be honest, all 3 levels of this DLC could probably be added in here, but I think the Holt definitely stands out as the toughest out of the whole bunch. I know it's been long enough now that the hardcore player base has probably trivialized most of this, but that doesn't change the fact that for us mere mortals, this thing just really kicked our asses. Probably the most challenging thing that the DLC added in was the spirit and the mechanic of these possessed demons. Possessed demons were stronger, faster, and resistant to all damage types, and the Holt puts this mechanic to use to an almost sadistic degree. The apex of this comes during a sequence when you're on a bridge without all that much room to maneuver, and then suddenly not 1 but 2 tyrants spawn in, one of them even being possessed, and then shortly after that a goddamn Doom Hunter spawns behind you. If that ain't enough, you've also got to deal with the other smaller demons, and what limited space you've got to move around also just happens to be populated with tentacles. Topped off with easily the hardest boss fight, I'd argue, maybe in the entire Doom series. Still though, that sense of accomplishment when you finally got through the whole thing was just amazing, and it also left us with one of the most badass cliffhanger endings of all time. While we're talking about Doom, next up we've got a level from the first game's 4th episode, Thy Flesh Consumed. Dave Oshry from New Blood once described this episode as flinging shit at a wall and hoping it sticks, and yeah, that's probably the best way to sum the whole thing up. Now, I know that a lot of people think the first map of this episode is the hardest, but I've always kind of thought that the second map, Perfect Hatred, is just way tougher. Simply because you're coming into it after the first level with probably barely any ammo or health. It also happens to have been designed by old mate John Romero himself, and yeah, what a perfect title for a map like this. Right off the bat, you're getting attacked by demons off in the distance. You got a few shotgun sergeants within breathing distance, and then a bunch of cacodemons that also beeline straight towards you. Once you've cleared out the first slot, you'll then see a running theme here, how a lot of these areas you need to navigate through are little more than just narrow walkways, often suspended over a drop into lava pits, which then requires some basic platforming just to get across. This level also relies pretty frequently on spawning in Barons of Hell, and on multiple occasions they're blocking necessary items like keycards. To put it into perspective, in this level if you're playing on Ultra Violence, you're going to have to deal with 12 Barons of Hell. along with all of the cacodemons and the lost souls, and if that ain't enough to take the jam out of your jelly donut, there's also a goddamn cyber demon guarding the room that leads to the exit. Oh yeah, and did I mention that the exit room also happens to be housing half a dozen or so cacodemons? Apparently it took Romero 6 hours to make this map from start to finish, and yeah, that definitely starts to make sense. About the only mercy here is a teleporter near the exit, which lets you telefrag the cyberdemon, leaving only a bunch of cacodemons to worry about, but at that point, it's kinda like asking someone if they want a glass of water while you've got your fist rammed up their ass. In comparison, the rest of this episode is mostly pretty easy and balanced, but this early map is a crushing introduction to one of Doom's most polarizing episodes. Gotta love how old school Return to Castle Wolfenstein is. It's a game that just doesn't give a fuck about how brutal it is on the player. And I think no level is a better example of that than the X-Labs. Set about 2/3 into the game, this whole level takes place in Norway as our boy BJ is heading into a hidden Nazi research facility to uncover their plans to create the ultimate soldier. Not only do you have to navigate a maze-like route to find your way through, but then you're also dealing with lopers that have broken out of confinement, not to mention prototype super soldiers. Lopers are those mutants with those electrical attacks that have a nasty habit of jumping right into your face. And they also take a good amount of coercion from the venom gun just to put down. Then the prototype super soldiers are those big armoured guys armed with RPGs and venom guns, who also take a whole lot of damage before buying the farm. Though I did always love that sound they make when you kill them. The exit to the first half of this level is guarded by two of these things, which I've always suspected is supposed to be some kind of reference to the end of Doom's first episode with the Barons of Hell. Anyway, after that, you've then got to take on another couple of these guys before a boss fight against a finished super soldier, who, along with the RPG and the venom gun, is also packing a goddamn Tesla gun. But check out how badass his introduction is, it's like a wrestling intro or something. What also kind of makes this boss fight tricky is that there's scientists on the walkway above you shooting at you with pistols the whole time. Though I guess on the plus side, you do get that catharsis of being able to murder them with the Tesla gun right after. I'm a glass half full kind of guy though, and I will say that the best thing about finishing this whole level is that you'll never have to fight those lopers for the rest of the whole campaign. On the subject of Wolfenstein, we've got another one here with what I think is hands down the hardest part of the second game, and that's the courtroom shootout about halfway through the campaign. This is where, after being caught, BJ imagines himself breaking out of his confines, only to then have a seemingly endless barrage of Nazis start attacking him. Why is this fight so tough? Well, I'm so glad you asked. For starters, you begin the fight with only a submachine gun, and at this point in the story, you're capped out at a measly 50 health points. Most of the cover in this area is also destructible, meaning you can't even rely on it for all that long. After a little while too, a couple of super soldiers jump through the ceiling and start attacking you. Because if there's one thing that these Wolfenstein games like, it's those damn super soldiers. Once the doors to the side rooms open up, it does become a bit easier, because you've now got a bit more space to evade incoming enemies. But the randomness of their movement still makes it pretty tricky, especially on higher difficulties. What makes the whole thing kinda pointless though is that you have to beat this to progress. I mean, even though it's just whipped up by BJ's imagination, every time you get killed, it restarts. You'd think that it would just snap back to reality, oops, there goes gravity, because I thought it was supposed to be more about the concept of him feeling like he was in this inescapable situation against all of these unbeatable odds. More than it is supposed to be an actual battle that has to be beaten. I mean, it's a symbolic struggle, representing the guy's waning mental and physical fortitude. You know what I mean? I won't be forgetting how much this sequence kicked my ass anytime soon. I mean, that's for damn sure. Now, I could probably put half the challenge maps and the arcade league matches from Timesplitters 2 into this video, to be honest, but instead I went with one of the most difficult story levels I'd argue in the entire series with Atom Smasher. In this one, you're playing as the ultimate Chad, Harry Tipper, taken place in 1972, as he's trying to stop the evil genius Kalos from taking over the world, the same thing we do every night.
I thought this had your stench all over it, Kalos.
I'm pleased you still have your sense of smell.
What makes this level so difficult though is mostly just the time limit. There's actually a few healing items tucked away throughout the level, but you're so strapped to try and get a bunch of bombs defused that you probably won't have time to get them anyway. Not to mention, you've also got to deal with all of Callus's henchmen who are ambushing you constantly, combined also with hazards like fires and gun turrets to deal with. Before you can exit the level, you've got to fight against Callus. Then you've got to pull down 4 different levers that have the smallest hitboxes in the history of gaming. And during all of that, the Timesplitters, who are the strongest enemies in the game by the way, spawn in around you and start attacking. And look, I'm not ashamed to admit that I've still never beat this level on hard mode on the consoles. It's the level that really filtered me when I played it as a teenager, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So look, I mean, if you actually manage to beat this thing on hard mode, well, then all I want to ask you is, how do you manage to walk around all the time with balls that big? Now, I knew that I had to have at least one level in here from either GoldenEye or Perfect Dark. I know that people will bitch about the escort quests in GoldenEye until they bleed from their assholes, but one of the toughest levels I always think of is in Perfect Dark, and it's one of the earliest ones in the game, and that's the Area 51 Infiltration. This is a mission that's more hard because of the limitations of your gear, and there's one particular weapon that's responsible for this more than the others, and that's the woeful magsec pistol, which is really inaccurate at anything other than close to medium range. The entire level is populated with gun turrets that can rip you to pieces, there's enemy spawns to catch you off guard, and it just keeps going on and on. And then, even after you complete your objectives and make it inside the base, you've then got to survive a shootout against a couple of dozen enemies who are all armed with one of the most powerful assault rifles in the entire game. Yeah, goody gumdrops. And in typical Rare fashion, you only get a single healing item for the entire level. In fact, if you're playing on Perfect Agent, you don't even get a single one at all. So you've really got to make every shot count and try to avoid damage as much as possible. Honestly, you could put every level of the game in here if you're talking about playing it on the Perfect Agent difficulty mode, but this one is the one that I always instantly think of, and it never fails to make me feel like an angry 15-year-old kid all over again. Around the same time we got Perfect Dark, we also got Turok 2 a couple of years prior, which was a super challenging shooter with one particularly confusing standout being the Lair of the Blind Ones. Heading deeper underground, there's too much panic in this town. You've got to take on spiders, both big and small. There's worms, there's the entrails, magmites, which are lizard-looking dudes that live in the lava, along with the blind ones themselves, who are kind of like what had happened if Daredevil was a flesh-eating cyclops. But what really makes this level so hard is the layout itself. Your objective is to seal 3 thermal vents, but to seal them, you'll first need to find the satchel charges which are scattered throughout the environment. And trying to make your way through this place is like trying to ice skate when you're cross-eyed. What makes it really tricky is that all of the tunnels you move through pretty much all look the same, making it really unclear as to whether or not you're even heading in the right direction. The recent remaster by Night Dive Studios definitely makes this level a whole lot easier. You've got an auto map for starters, the option to save your game whenever you like, and objectives can also be highlighted through walls with a giant glowing exclamation mark. But that still doesn't change how hard this one is at its core, and I still remember playing this thing as a kid and never being able to actually beat it without using cheats. Not to mention the giant spiders you have to face in this level also made me break out in a cold sweat, and this is coming from an Australian. I mean, we invented spiders, along with Knifey Spoony.
I see you've played Knifey Spoony before.
Finally, we've got another level from an old shooter with the wrong side of the tracks in Blood. Blood is a game that's about as hard as your memory wills it to be, and by that I mean it's a game that becomes harder or easier, depending on whether or not you remember the locations of enemies beforehand. But even still, knowing enemy placements won't save you this time, bitch. And this is what I've always thought is one of, if not the hardest levels in the entire game, which again, like Perfect Hatred in Doom, is actually one of the earliest. Part of what makes this level so challenging is that you still don't really have all that many weapons or that much ammo to work with. Starts off pretty easy though on the outskirts of the station, and you've only got to worry about a couple of zombies and some lone cultists, but after that it really ramps right up. You're now out front the station, and assuming you're playing on well done difficulty mode, you're gonna have to be dealing with a few shotgun and Tommy gun cultists. After that, you're in the station dealing with more zombies and cultists, and another half a dozen or so inside the main area. A lot of them being placed around corners so you won't see them until it's too late. The one mercy in this level though is that if you can find it, there's an invisibility power up which makes the final part of the level a lot easier if you're fast enough. You can basically just murder this last batch of cultists without any of them even seeing you if you can get to the platform in time. After this level, the whole thing kind of balances out though when you get the Tommy gun, the napalm launcher, and much more ammo. But this second level is a really good example of how crushing Blood's combat can be and how relentless and deadly those cultists are. Well, anyway, that kind of brings us to the end of my list. If you can think of any that I might have missed, or there's any others you think are worth talking about, well, be sure to mention it in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, and have any ideas for more videos I could make, well, be sure to let me know. Thanks for watching.